Turkish President Erdogan is calling on Russia to open a dialogue over the downing of a Russian fighter jet. In a statement a short time ago, Erdogan said he wanted to settle the issue, saying, quote, "Let's not make others happy by escalating it to a level that could hurt all our relations," end quote. Turkey's president has already extended an invitation to Russian President Vladimir Putin to have a side meeting at this week's climate summit in Paris. Putin has not responded, and just in the last hour, Reuters is reporting new economic sanctions are being taken by Russia against Turkey. They include restricting travel and the hiring of Turkish workers for some companies. All right, let's take a closer look at the escalating tensions. With me now, Lieutenant General Mark Herling, a CNN military analyst and retired Army commanding general, Europe and the 7th Army. Good to see you. And Lieutenant Colonel Tony, I laugh because we joke all the time. I'm like, your title gets longer and longer. You just have an incredible, repertoire of experience. Congratulations on that. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, a retired Army intelligence operative. Good to see you as well.
Good to see you too.
Okay, so gentlemen, so Turkey is taking a more conciliatory tone, but Vladimir Putin so far giving the cold shoulder. I just explained the other things like visa restrictions, etc. But now, do you worry, Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, that this is a prelude to something else far more serious, far more, I guess, nerve-wracking as it pertains to Russia and Turkey, that relationship, and maybe Russia and its positioning with Bashar al-Assad in Syria?
Well, it's very clear. Turkey is essentially no one's ally except itself right now. It's playing its own game. NATO was very quick to distance itself from the downing of the Russian jet. And frankly, they have not been our best ally regarding ISIS by the fact they left the back door open. They've been one of the main trading partners with ISIS. And so I think Putin's actions now are going to be measured against two things. His long game. Putin clearly has designs on trying to essentially recap and recapture power they lost there in the 70s, essentially going for 60% of the control of the world oil through his alliance with the Iranians. Secondly, he will not sit quietly and let this go by. He will be doing things. You've already seen the sanctions in place. I suspect they'll be doing other things behind the scenes. You will not see a direct response, but I think both sides will want to keep this as contained as possible as they go forward.
And then, General Hertling, so what is behind, or is there a way of explaining from perhaps a military strategic point of view, what is it about Russia being so committed to Bashar al-Assad and Syria in that respect, while also, carrying out air missions in the northern portion of Syria, which would supposedly be targeting ISIS, but then Vladimir Putin says he's not necessarily targeting ISIS. I mean, that's not the main objective. It is more so to support Bashar al-Assad. Can you have it both ways, or is it one and the same?
You can't, Fred, and this has been an interesting dynamic, and you have to consider that both Mr. Putin and Mr. Erdogan have often posed themselves as irrational actors on the world scene. To start, the first thing they've done is thrown around economic sanctions. It's bizarre when you think about it. I mean, when I was in Europe, Russia and Turkish economy were the two worst in all of Europe. And Turkey is the only country in Europe that's not supporting the sanctions against Russia, against Ukraine. So for Mr. Putin to say, hey, we're going to throw sanctions up against Turkey is just, it's just crazy. But when you take a look, as Tony said, the Russian long game, their long game is to buy strategic objectives. They've done it in the Black Sea. They're trying to do it in the Mediterranean, and that's one of their biggest reasons for having this friendship with Mr. Assad. They have bases that give them access to the Mediterranean, and they want that. They really don't care who's in power. They've supported him in the past. You'll see a wavering of this, but you talk about the combination of Russia with Iran, Russia with Syria, Russia against the United States and using Syria and Iran to do that. Russia against the NATO expansion. He'll do the same thing there. So this is a very strange strategic game Mr. Putin is playing. And he's playing it without an economy or a military that truly supports his objectives. That's the problematic piece.
And then, Colonel Shaffer, how do you interpret Russia also deploying large missiles to Syria? Kremlin saying these missiles will stop something like the shoot down from happening ever again, or is there something else here?
No, Mark is correct. This is part of the long game. This is everything that they're doing essentially is trying to reestablish the influence they lost in the 70s for purposes of essentially keeping control of what they have, expanding it. We're calling what they're doing and with Syria and Iran the Damascus Pact. They're really trying to reestablish these condominiums which really will benefit his activities there. And so what you're seeing here is these new weapon systems are not going to deter or stop Turkey from doing what it did this time. It's more about trying to protect the resources and locations he feels that he wants to protect. And again, I think what we have to recognize here is Putin is playing his own game. He's been on this game for a while, and he will ally himself with anybody he thinks will benefit his objectives. Bashar al-Assad, I think, is going to be cashiered before too long. I mean, the Russians have already telegraphed their willingness to negotiate his departure. The biggest thing that is beneficial to us right now, Fred, is the fact that he has to help us retain Syria as governed space. Terrorists are drawn to ungoverned space. So like we saw in Libya, we do not want to see the chaos caused by a removal of a leader and seeing everything fall apart. That would actually, it would even help ISIS much more.
Right. All right. Well, that's, as we know, that's been the argument of how they were able to take advantage of space in Iraq, in Somalia, and also in Libya, as you say. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Colonel Tony Shaffer and General Mark Herdling. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
All right.